All right, welcome back to Lost for Words with Lori. It is the 31st of May. It's Tuesday. June 1st is amongst us, guys. It's already almost the end of the first half of the year, and I can't even believe it's going so fast. Where does the time go? Wow. Like, holy shit, you know? So I hope everybody had a great long holiday weekend here in the States. Memorial Day was yesterday, and wow, some gave all and gave their lives for the ultimate freedom, I guess you could call it. That was what Memorial Day is to honor the fallen veterans, the people who gave their lives for our freedoms here in the United States, and that is what we celebrate on Memorial Day. So we get a day off of work for that honor, to honor and memorialize those people that we've lost. For me, kind of to honor my fallen hero, who would have been Toby, who I lost 7 months ago tomorrow. I think that'll be 7 months, right? If you can believe that. Talking about time flying and how it goes pretty quickly. I last spoke to you guys a few days ago, less than a week, about the struggles and the struggle being real. And today I kind of wanted to unwrap some other things, I guess, and kind of dish. You know how that works in my world, because that's how the Lori do. And I kind of think about things, and I like to vent it out here, and that's kind of what I do here. And kind of wanted to give you guys my thoughts today about some things that I've been thinking about and some perspectives, and kind of this is my life. This is my life now, and this is what I'm doing, and my perspectives on a few things as things have rolled out. Things have been kind of crazy and chaotic again, as usual, and we talked a lot. Well, I've talked a lot, and my podcast is centered around a lot of things, mostly being toxic cesspool world and how that relates to my grief journey and my healing path, and how all of that kind of comes full circle as of late, and what's been going on with that, I guess. And it's kind of crazy how things change and how you learn a lot about yourself. And as you know, I've been in grief counseling and doing therapy. And that journey started long before Toby had passed. We had been doing, therapy and counseling together. He had been doing therapy himself, and I had been doing therapy myself, and we had been doing therapy together, and learning about ourselves and about our own, unpacking our own baggage and our past, and learning about how those things affected our first world and what we were dealing with. And a lot of that had to do with, for me personally, was unlearning unhealthy coping mechanisms and things that no longer served me. And, it's strange and interesting how when you're developing in your first world, your friendships, your real first world relationships with people, how you talk with them about how we all have survival mechanisms that we have used that have served us very well in our whole lives, because life happens and life is hard. And for me personally, I had a tough life, and I had a lot of things and circumstances and things that I had to work through my whole life. And you get to a point where you no longer need to do those things anymore. For me, I had to unlearn a lot of coping mechanisms that served me very well for many, many years, because, I was in survival mode for many years, and I'm not really in survival mode anymore because those things are no longer a valid threat. And I don't have to revert back to those behaviors because those situations are no longer valid. And it's crazy, my perspective being now that peripherally, as you maintain and manage new relationships, new friendships, and you're helping your friends navigate their lives, and you obviously have experiences just like I learn how to navigate new situations in my life from people who've been there before, and try to offer wisdom and advice to them, on how to navigate things and situations that come up with them. And that very situation, or um, that that lesson has become very clear, as I've tried to explain that to some of my friends, that you know from my perspective, what I see is that everybody does that. I think we all hang on to coping mechanisms from our past because they're safe, and we're used to those things because they've helped us survive, and they've always been really good for us in our past, and they've worked well and they've managed to get us to where we are. But then when those things are no longer present in our lives and they're no longer a threat, we still fall back on those behaviors because they're safe, and because they've worked, and because they're what we're used to. But at some point, they are no longer valid, and we no longer need to use them. And in new situations with new things, for me personally, the coping mechanisms that I had in place my whole life, are no longer valid for me, and they no longer work. And instead of being good for me now, they don't serve me anymore, and now they are sabotaging. Now they will no longer serve my life in my present situation, because those situations are no longer there. Um, and I find that it's difficult in a lot of ways, to get people to understand that, especially when, and that's why I have therapy, is because it's difficult for me to see outside of my own bubble, right? It's very difficult to see outside of your own four walls when you're sitting in them. And I look for that third party perspective, which is why I have, friends, or I have colleagues, or I have, a therapist who's able to give me that perspective, because they can see it unemotionally. They can see it unattached, in a way where they can say, have you ever thought about it this way? And it's become very helpful for me, in my journey, and in my healing process, in my journey to become a better human, to enrich and better my own life. And when it comes down to it, I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm allowed to fix and unlearn and do something different. I'm allowed to make new choices. And that my peace of mind and my mental health is more important, than the torture of trying to figure out why I'm so miserable, or why this is no longer working, or why I'm still spinning my wheels, in these situations where I'm frustrated, or I'm feeling the way that I feel, and it's not working for me. And it's hard. Life is hard. And it's always going to be difficult when you're, trying to be a good friend, and trying to listen to the struggles that the people that you're closest to are having, and give them that perspective. For me, I think one of the lessons that I'm learning is that, I can't fix anybody else's situation but my own. And if I'm not asked for any advice, I don't give it unless anyone wants it and asks for it. And when they do, because I'm transparent, and because I have boundaries, and because I've established that I'm honest, they need to be prepared to hear, my insight, if they ask for it, completely honest, and they might not like what they hear. But it makes me a bad friend, and it would make me dishonest, to be blunt, if I didn't give them an honest answer to the question. And I know that it sucks, and I know that it hurts, and change is painful, folks. I've made that very clear in previous podcasts. Change is frightening and it's scary, and evolving and changing and growing is never easy. And for me, letting go of all of the safe behaviors that have served me so well for decades in my life, and stepping out into that unknown universe, in this new life, which is my life now, is terrifying. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that. But at what point do we decide to choose our battles and decide what we want to do with them and continue on to make a better life for ourselves? Or do we continue in the vicious cycle that we've been in for most of our lives? For me, I was given that opportunity to start over again. Wasn't given, I suppose. It was chosen for me, and that made me very angry. I like to make my own choices. I don't like choices being forced upon me. And I think that that kind of situation makes a lot of people very angry. And when they become angry, they don't like that emotion, and it makes them uncomfortable. And most people, most humans that I know, have a tendency to lash out when they're angry. And that's very apparent in my first world right now, that people who are thrust into situations in their life where they aren't given a choice, their first reaction is to be very angry. And I can relate to that. I've been there. I am there. And they make those decisions and fall back on those behaviors that they feel safe, and lash out at other people. And it makes it hard to look at situations objectively, and choose their battles wisely. You know, toxic cesspool world and social media is a really scary, dangerous place for a lot of people. I think it's difficult for a lot of people to separate from the reality of your first world and what's truly in front of you, and the world that you're using to escape from. And a lot of us live in a black and white world and don't realize that there's a lot of gray area there. And you have to be able to separate those two and find real balance. And I think finding balance is a lot easier said than done. And I have a feeling I'm going to struggle with it probably for a long time. I don't know if anybody will ever truly find balance. But that's my journey and my struggle. But I think in order to be a good friend, to be a good human, to keep on that path of being the best version of myself that I can be, I can't stress enough that I am going to continue to be as transparent as I can, continue to hold my boundaries as firm as I can, and I have to make those decisions for me, for what best serves me and my interests. And there's a fine line to walk between being self-serving and being a good friend. And that sometimes causes conflicts, and being able to resolve those conflicts as an adult, and be compassionate towards my fellow human and understand that their struggle is their struggle. And you can be supportive of others, but also be mindful of your own boundaries and your own expectations within that process. And the very real come to Jesus moment, I guess you could call it, of, for me, I can't fix these things. I can't fix these issues for other people. And that to be a good human and to be a good friend is to just be present in that moment and to allow people to be uncomfortable in their situations because they have to be. I mean, that's the reality of everyone's situation. I had to deal and will continue to deal with the emotions and how I don't like them, and there are a lot of unpleasant emotions that go with my own journey, no matter what that looks like. Just as everyone that I'm close to and my friends will have that same struggle, and that while their feelings are uncomfortable and they suck, I can't fix those things for them as much as it pains me to watch them go through them. But I can still be present, and I can still be compassionate and still offer them the empathy and the sympathy and the grace, and the space to express those emotions without having to offer any solutions. And that's very difficult for somebody who has experience in some of those things, whether it's from a domestic violence or, a trauma or, grief or whatever that experience may be. I'm finding that it's allowing me space to revisit a lot of my own emotions in those. There's some healing that goes with that. There's also some triggering trauma responses that go with that, to be fair. But again, it gives me the ability to practice my own boundaries. It gives me the ability to practice my own homework in therapy. It gives me the ability to learn more about what it is that I need in my world. And it gives me the ability to tell all you about it. And also maybe think a little bit more about how that translates into your first world. Interesting enough, watching multiple people I know go through the grieving process of losing loved ones, whether it be, friends who had lost loved ones before me, or people who are currently in the process of watching terminally ill loved ones lose their lives now, and are going through something similar, not the same as what I may have experienced with losing Toby, and being able to revisit and what I call recycle a lot of the emotions that I felt during that time, gives you a greater and deeper appreciation for the compassion and the understanding of your own mortality, your own life, and what your goals and your dreams should and could be, because life is short, and where your place is and where you fit, and what you are living for. And I think that's been very apparent in the last week or so as I've reached out to touch base with a lot of people. And that's sometimes it's hard to wrap your brain around, so to speak. But this is my life, and this is my life now, and trying to figure out what it is that I want to do, and express that for everyone that I know, you are allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to take a break. You're allowed to make decisions, and not say that's my final answer, because your journey is always changing and ever evolving, and you don't have to make decisions based on whatever emotion is in that moment. And you're accountable for your decisions, obviously, and the choices that you make, but you're allowed to say, I don't have to make decisions because I'm feeling this way right now. And I think that's been my biggest lesson, in at least as I unwrap things in this last week, is that I'm allowed to say, this is how I feel right now. But it doesn't need to guide every decision that I make going forward. Deep thoughts, folks. Deep thoughts. Life is hard. I think when it comes down to it, we all have a responsibility to ourselves, first and foremost. And it's hard when we have so much responsibility to other people, sometimes to our parents, sometimes to our partner, husband, wife, spouse, sometimes our children. And at the end of the day, I think until I realized and I had no one left to be responsible for except for me, did I realize that had I learned the lesson that I needed to be responsible and accountable for myself first, even with those responsibilities, had I found balance in those things and had been transparent and accountable within those means, that those journeys and struggles probably would have been less. But I think we all live with the expectations that other people have put on us. Fair enough, because that's what society has done. And social media is doing it now. And I think it's clouding a lot of people's judgment because they believe that they need to be validated by those things instead of seeking that validation from within, which is so, so important. But those are my thoughts this week, and today, and the last few days, as I've had time to recenter, reground, and regroup back to what I needed to do for me and think about where my life is and what's important yet again. But tell me what you think. I'm going to keep on moving forward. Still working on some other ideas, some other thoughts. I hope everyone sits back, tries to breathe, count to 10, reevaluate what it is in your first world that's important and what it means for you in your first world that's waiting for you to find your piece of joy that makes you happy. Most people don't know because they validate what makes them happy based on what makes other people happy before them. But until then, guys, wash your fucking hands and be a good human.